It is now my pleasure to introduce a dear friend and an amazing activist in Charlotte and the area, LaWana Mayfield. LaWana is a Charlotte native and an active member of St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church. LaWana has been a strong activist in this community for over 20 years. In 2011, she was elected to represent District 3 on the Charlotte City Council, where she served for 8 years. LaWana is a former member of the Immigrant Solidarity Committee, Charlotte Community Justice Coalition, executive board member of the Human Rights Campaign, and the board of advisors of the Charlotte Lesbian and Gay Fund. She served as Mecklenburg Justice Project Coordinator at Grassroots Leadership with a focus on ending the for-profit prisons as well as immigration reform and community organizing. We welcome LaWana to Wedgewood.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good morning, Wedgewood family. Melba, thank you so much for inviting me this morning. Everyone, thank you for taking time out to be here. As mentioned, I am LaWana Mayfield, the longer version, LaWana Slack Mayfield. And we all know that this month of March honors women. Well, I would like to focus on the power of our vote. To understand the significance of this responsibility, I will invite you all to join me down a road that is not linked with gold and fairy tales. Rather, it is a winding road that has blood-covered tear stains, heartbreak, and joy along the way. The suffrage movement discussion dates as early as 1848. I want us to go to 1867, when suffragism was at the height of debate. Then let's hop to 1870 with the ratified 15th Amendment that granted Black men the right to vote. Those impacts can be discussed another day. But let's think about how this helped to create the language of the suffragists to sway white conservative men to support white women having the power to vote and to offset the newly acquired vote of the Black male. If you are a believer of details matter and a seeker of full truth, I implore you to reread and understand the tactic from the start. You see, from the beginning, Susan B. Anthony strategized what she believed would be the right path to the road that she and others wanted to access. I will cut off this right arm of mine before I will ever work or demand a ballot for the Negro and not the woman, she stated in her speech. As cobblestone this road we tread, we must continue. You see, Black women were not a part of this equation, as racism was embedded in our culture. Negro women were not considered as women at this point and had even less value to many than Black men. So in essence, the Negro she spoke about was all Black people, although at this point it was Black men who did obtain access. For some, that belief still haunts us today. Our fight is far from over, although in 2020, 91% of Black women voted in favor of electing our current president, Joseph R. Biden, compared to 55% of white women who voted for Donald Trump. Women of color are still negatively impacted. President Biden ran on a campaign naming systemic racism and stated, "You've always had my back and I'll have yours." That was directed to many in the Black community. Yet his opposition to change procedural rules so that the voting rights bill could pass with a simple majority has not happened. As recently as March 2nd, 2022, in his first presidential address, not only did he state we should fund the police, he doubled down on the message without addressing the billion-dollar budgets cities such as New York have, and the less than 2% budget allocation to mental health, community programs, alternatives to incarceration, raising teacher pay, access to home ownership, or community-led programming, while committing $350 billion for local governments to hire more police. Also, not addressing the record of fatal police shootings with very few officers being charged and convicted in these murders or assaults. Now, I know that in February, the Wedgewood Community Church Social Justice Book Club read Say Their Names, How Black Lives Came to Matter in America by Patrice Gaines. So I say, Breonna Taylor, 26, murdered in her home, March 13, 2020. Ma'Khia Bryant, 16, murdered after calling 911 for help, April 20th, 2021. Atiana Jefferson, 28, murdered in her home when 911 was called for a wellness check, October 12, 2019. Pamela Turner, 44, an unarmed grandmother battling a mental illness manic episode, murdered May 13, 2019. Corin Gaines, 23, murdered, and her 5-year-old son shot in the face, August 1st, 2016. Yvette Smith, 47, murdered, February 16, 2014. Miriam Carey, 34, murdered October 3rd, 2013. Shelley Frey, 27, murdered December 6, 2012. Darnisha Harris, 16, murdered December 2nd, 2012. Melissa Williams, 30, murdered November 29th, 2012. Chantel Davis, 23, murdered June 14, 2012. Rakia Boyd, 22, murdered March 22nd, 2012. Aiyana Stanley Jones, 7, murdered as she slept, May 16, 2010. Tarika Wilson, 26, murdered January 4, 2008. Catherine Johnston, 92, murdered November 21st, 2006. Kendra James, 21, murdered May 5th, 2003. Taisha Miller, 19, murdered December 28, 1998. And many more that I have not named whose families deserve justice. Understand that whether a child, young adult, mother, or grandmother, Black bodies are not seen as women. So as we celebrate Women's History Month, know these women are also our history. Yes, your vote matters because we elect city mayors, sheriff, local, state, national officials who create, support, and introduce legislation that can protect or harm. Our vote matters when humanity, compassion, and work towards connecting a wrong committed shows up at the ballot box. We all may have at one time or another stated representation matter. Okay, let's look at representation. Today, out of 144 women in the 117th Congress, only 26 identify as Black, with 95 that identify as white, and the other 24 represent Asian Pacific Islander, Latino, Native, Alaskan, Native Hawaiian, Middle Eastern, and North African Americans, totaling only 27% female representation. Yes, we have made strides through the years. We as women have gained the Workforce One Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, and I can go through the list of achievements, including the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010, which requires companies of 50+ employees to provide covered women with time and a private space to express breast milk while still at work. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which addressed the fact that monetary payments made by businesses to settle claims of sexual harassment or sexual abuse with tax deductible as a business expense only if the settlement does not include a non-disclosure agreement and prohibits the tax deductibility of legal fees incurred during the settlement process. Let's think about that in that time of Me Too. Now ask yourself, have these policies benefited all women? The Dream Center counted 44% of the homeless population were women in 2017, right here in our Queen City. Mothers were the most impacted when daycares and schools closed their doors during the height of COVID. Princeton University's eviction lab found and researched that among renters in 39 states, 756,000 women were evicted annually, compared to 294,908 men between 2012 and 2016, which is a 16% difference, with the biggest disparity between genders were for Black renters, with nearly 37% more Black women than men during that same time. Keep in mind that the market sets sale prices, but 72% of white families are homeowners compared to 42% of Black families. With rates of Black home ownership steadily declining over the years, even before the 2008 housing market crash, the average first home purchase by a Black buyer is valued at $127,000, but we accrue $90,000 in mortgage debt. While first-time home buyers' homes are valid at $139,000 with $75,000 mortgage debt, which places Black buyers in more debt for a less value asset, weakening our investment return. Those are not the numbers that our sisters and brothers are also seeing. North Carolina has a 65.3% home ownership rate, which breaks down to 45% African American, 73.8% white, 65.9% American Indian and Alaskan, Native 65.5%, Asian at 47.2%. All of these are numbers through stacker.com. So consider that in 2019, Charlotte had a population of around 886,000 people, with the median age of 34 and the median household income of $63,483. With our 5 largest ethnic groups being white, non-Hispanic, around 359,000 people, which is about 40.5%, Black or African American, around 308,000 people, 34.7%, Hispanic, 7.5%, white Hispanic, those who identify, 6.39%, and Asian non-Hispanic, 6.19%, around 66,000.4 people. Combined with the median property value that was $252,100, with a 52.4% home ownership rate, according to Data USA IO, because I want y'all to have the figures to check this on your own. As of January this year, the median house price was $360,000, up 24.4%. So you think about the earlier numbers I shared with you and the impact of loss, and we look at the impact of housing. Based on these numbers I shared, who do you believe is benefiting from this increase and who has been impacted during our housing crisis? Now, I would say we have gained some traction, and we are working towards a sisterhood that acknowledges the shortcomings of the past, the need to have women across the ethnic aisles to stand next to us and at times in front of us as shields. We know that when women decide to engage, we change outcomes that can benefit the collective, but that only happens when we show up in our full authenticity. Now, for me, I am still at it as the only African-American female who's on the ballot for Charlotte City Council at large. We have a May primary, in a city that has elected only one African American in an at-large seat. So as many may remember, Ms. Scarborough, our first Black woman council member, was elected as the District 3 representative. Just as she fought for housing options on city council, she fought for it on the Board of County Commissioners, because when you see a plight, it is an elected's responsibility to try to address it. Wow. So I had so many additional facts and figures to share with you. And I know this is a heavy presentation, and honestly, I rewrote this several times. I just could not see a way to discuss Women's History Month without addressing some of the systemic policy that guided us to where we are today. And then it occurred to me that I'm also women's history. I'm a product of women exercising their power in the ballot box. When I was first elected in 2011, which allowed me to serve for 8 years, I was the second Black female elected to Charlotte City Council and the first out elected official. Yet the energy was placed on my personal relationship rather than our city not having a Black female representation for 15 years. As a former community organizer, I worked with community partners to write language that focused on access, and then as an elected member, passed Ban the Box to remove barriers to employment. And it was an uphill battle with some of my council colleagues, some who are asking for second chances. I created policy that benefited our working poor and working class neighbors, such as the TLC by COT housing rehab program. And although I pushed for more progressive measures to open pathways to home ownership, I also championed small business growth. I've spoken out on injustice through tear-stained eyes as my heart was breaking, because I believe that we have a responsibility to do so. I also believe in us and the future that we could create. We're coming together to fight for protections of our reproductive decisions. We're together to fight against misogyny. We're running for more offices daily to ensure that our diverse values are represented, because we are not monolithic. And it's evident by the 48 women that are on the ballot for May 14th, right here in Charlotte. We have the opportunity to gain power that, when combined together, will change not only this city, it will change our nation by women supporting women, understanding each other, and by challenging our own bias and see each other through a lens of love and equity. Yes, our vote as women matters, because all women matter. For these reasons and more, I'm continuing my race. For these reasons and more, I humbly ask you to join me at the polls during early voting. We have to make sure our community is educated and they know what's going on, because this is an unprecedented year. We've never had a May primary. Early voting started in April, a potential July general election. And I'm talking to people every day that don't even know that elections are happening. We say women should support women, where that also comes in us holding each other accountable and educating. Early voting starts April 28th. I'm asking you to pull the lever for me as one of your council member at large. I'm asking you to learn that entire ballot, because judges are on there. Women are on there that can help direct how our community moves forward. I'm asking you to, I'm challenging you, begging you, identify 3 of your friends and challenge them to do the same. Do the same with reaching out. Representation matters. And I want to represent you in community, on council, but more importantly, by your side.